what is a weed? What's a nuisance? What's worthless vegetation? Why 6 inches? Been reading a lot of ordinances here the last week, and it's 9 inches. 9 inches, okay, great, that's taller, but it's still freaking short, right? Plants don't hit 9 inches and be like, oh, okay, I'm done. Some of them do, right? But majority don't. 9 inches is crazy. You're gonna have very few ecosystem services at that height. So you go to the websites of your cities, your counties, and they're going to talk about what is it. They're going to talk about what is a nuisance weed, and they'll throw in invasive plants, right? So that's an exotic species that alters the landscape to suit its own needs. So it really is taking over at the detriment of other plant communities that are around it. It's going to create a monoculture. Um, I think our poster child for that around here, well, maybe not even entirely fair, is musk thistle. I mean, musk thistle is a problem, but I think there's a lot worse things out there right now, like Dame's rocket and what was the other one I was just thinking of? Oh, creeping Charlie is not considered an invasive plant species, but it is. You guys know what I'm talking about. There's a difference between invasive and aggressive, right? Invasive is taking over with the goal of totally altering the plant community. It's invasive is going to be a non-indigenous plant species. Now, we do have aggressive native plants, tall goldenrod, Canadian goldenrod. These are species that spread, they're very gregarious. They spread a lot by rhizome. They put out a lot of seed. And the plant communities you find them in, they're going to be with plants that have, similar socioability levels, right? Other plants that are highly gregarious, throw out a lot of seed, spread by root runners. And the reason they're all together like that is because they sort of keep each other in check. They all have the same ability to sort of duke it out and work with one another. Work with one another isn't maybe the best way to put it. They are all competing for resources. That's what plants do, right? And that's what we do, and look how that's turning out. So our county, Lancaster County, Nebraska here, I'm coming to you from Lincoln, Nebraska, the state capital, where we're supposed to have prairie around our state capital, but we have lawn instead. This is their invasive noxious weed list, and it probably should be a lot longer. Now, if they're sending you a notice talking about invasive noxious weeds, it's likely you don't actually have any of those plants in your landscape. But again, the part-time summer help that they are sending out to check that box on, they don't know, right? They're not going to go around and spend an hour or two doing an inventory. They've got 50 other job sites that they need to go check on. So Canada thistle, yeah, I mean that's certainly highly gregarious exotic species. Teasel knotweed, spurge, yeah, I mean, we do have spurge issues, certainly even just in our prairies. Right, Chinese thistle. I was trying to think if I want to talk about any. Frankly, we've got eastern red cedar, and even though that's a native tree, I definitely consider that an invasive species. Always shocks me when I'm on the East Coast and I see it for sale at nurseries. I'm like, are you guys nuts? Like one even semi-mature female plant is producing like 1 million berries, and those things get pooped out far and wide from birds, and before you know it, you have nothing but cedar. So they're totally overtaking our grasslands out here. Now it's the slow green invasion, I think they call it. So a lot of times weed inspectors are going to focus on thistle, right? Canadian thistle, bull thistle, musk thistle, so that if they see anything in your landscape that looks like a thistle, it's really amazing. It's really entertaining to see. They're going to go straight to that plant and say, "Is that a thistle?" No, that's a Liatris ligula stylus. That's a Liatris aspera. The blooms look a little bit like a thistle, but they're a lot smaller on a lot shorter plant. Now, there is a wonderful way that you can differentiate between native and exotic thistles. This works most of the time. Native thistles, when you turn the leaf over, it's going to be a silver underleaf, almost a white underleaf. Whereas, like a musk thistle, you turn it over, it's just going to be a slightly lighter shade of green. So that's a good way to tell that. You can go through this with your weed inspector when they come out to your site, because you're going to ask them to come out. You're not just going to roll over and give up. So our county does encourage prairie garden plantings on their website. And it's not a very extensive website. The web pages, there's not much content on them. They're not linking to a lot of places, but at least there's something there. So our county encourages prairie garden plantings, but also the use of natives that are resistant to the pre and post emergent herbicide plateau. Okay, that's problematic for a lot of reasons, as you can already guess. So this means though, if you're putting a pre-emergent herbicide out there, like in the spring before things start growing, um, that means that the seedling, any seed that is out there from your native plants cannot germinate. And if you're not having those plants germinate, then you're going to have gaps in your garden bed. Those gaps are going to be filled by something else at some point. So it's better to have more desirable native plant species, and they're letting native plants do what they're designed to do, what they're evolved to do. In a natural garden, you want the plants to fill in. You want that living green mulch to take over, so you never have to put wood mulch down again, right? So pre-emergent herbicide defeats the purpose of succession in a natural garden. Succession being that, certain plants are going to grow, they're going to have offspring, and other plants are going to take over and things are going to move and shift, but you're going to at least have that thick density in the landscape, which gives us all the wonderful ecosystem services, from carbon sequestration to reducing stormwater runoff to cooling the air around structures. And then, of course, support for butterfly and moth larvae and the adults and all the bugs and the spiders and all the good stuff, all the sexy stuff we want. This is their suggested species list for a prairie garden, plants that are plateau herbicide compatible, right? So blue grama, Bouteloua gracilis, buffalo grass, Cytos grama, Bouteloua curtipendula, and then a few others. The problem with this plant list, besides some of these not even being native, um, is that they don't really necessarily go together in a plant community way. They're not matched together based on their socioability levels, based on knitting them together in a matrix, which is several different layers, ground cover, intermediate, taller plants, right? This isn't creating an ecosystem. This is just a hodgepodge of plants they're on a list. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to work together in the ecological ways we want a natural garden to do. So yes, I could reach out to them, I suppose, and spend the rest of my year advocating for a different list, suggesting things to do, or I could just write my next book. So hopefully somebody will take this on, at least if not here in your community. So here we go again off of our local website. Weeds and worthless vegetation. When plants are overgrown, they become a nuisance and unacceptable to the general public and need to be controlled. So we're looking at the language now in a little bit more depth, because again, this language is pretty universal. You're going to see it across weed code and ordinances around the country. So when plants become overgrown is the thing I want you to focus on. I want you to focus on that word overgrown. This is what they're concerned about the most. And every other argument stems from this that they're going to make with you. There may be a safety concern at intersections or crosswalks. I drive by all the time, well-intentioned gardeners having a more natural bed, and it's right on the corner. It's right up against the street. It's right on the curb, and there are plants that are 4 feet tall. Okay, there are so many issues with that. Obviously, it is a huge safety concern. You cannot quite as easily see the cars. You cannot see the little girl on their bike sitting there waiting to see if it's safe for her to cross, because she's hidden behind those plants that are 4 feet tall. There's a reason why we see so many ordinances talking about setbacks, not just from lot lines, but setbacks from the street. So if you are on a corner, you got to be really especially aware of these issues. Like here in this health strip, well, let's just pretend this is a corner. This isn't going to fly. Of course, you're going to get report. This is bad, right? If that was on a corner. Here you go again. You can read all that, or you can just focus on the red circle of doom, right? The code considers uncontrolled or uncultivated growth of weeds, brush, grasses, or other vegetation. Okay, great. So again, they are controlled with this idea of things that look weedy, that look unmanaged. Obviously, if you're putting plants in your landscape from plugs or seed, you selected those plants for a reason, hopefully, not just throwing them out willy-nilly. But again, there's so much more that goes into selecting plants for your site. And if you were in my garden masterclass a couple of weeks ago, we talked about matrix. We talked about sociobuilding, how you need to make more informed decisions. I'm going to hammer that home a little bit later today too. So yep, that's what they are super concerned with what uncontrolled means, right? And that's where you don't want to have. I showed you that slide earlier of Pacra aurea, that yellow spring blooming flower that was taking over a large garden bed, because that's what it does. It's what it's evolved to do. It spreads easily by root and by seed. But that's the kind of species you don't want in our front yard. And you certainly don't want it next to the street, because they're going to call that uncontrolled and uncultivated, even if you put it there on purpose. There's your Asclepias syriaca again, right? No go. Beneficial use of plants in a natural garden, erosion control, control of pollutant runoff, educational purposes, cultivation of veg for consumption, pleasure, or business reasons. Ah, pleasure. You just be sitting out there with your flowers all day long, just smelling them, and people can walk by seeing you just sitting there smelling them and they'll think you're a freak, but that's okay. It's for pleasure. I'm weird, I'm sorry. Natural areas including wetlands and wooded areas. So it's interesting. We have these really vague beneficial uses, but they could probably also still go in and say like, oh no, this is a wooded area, but that's uncontrolled vegetation. That looks weedy, right? Yeah, erosion control. I don't know. So these are just tools and strategies to think about when you're advocating for your landscape. I'm sure we have people here who are looking for plants to on a steep slope or something like that. I've designed landscapes on steep slopes. So that's one argument you can use when you meet with an inspector or superintendent. Fair enough. The deeper issues in this conversation today, it would be a disservice not to point out the deeper conversation because we have classist and racist undertones in all of the language here going on with city code ordinances all around the country. Much of the language is the same that has historically been used to dismiss and undermine communities of color since late 1800s at least, as well as urban communities targeted for improvement, right? That house needs to come down, that building needs to be come down so this developer can come in and make a lot of money and give the city more tax benefits, right? So these words that have been used to for ill treatment of minority groups are weedy, messy, blighted, overgrown. There's an area, I think it was in Philadelphia, they're quite aware of that. Lawn itself has origins in upper class betterment societies starting right around 1900 in the northeast of the United States. And they proclaimed a right way to landscape to improve the moral character of lower and middle classes. Yes, that is actually the language, the moral character of lower and middle classes. You were more moral, you were more American if you had a lawn, which is just crazy to think about, isn't it? But we haven't really gotten away from this, not even just in the lawn realm. So of course, few people had the time or resources to cultivate a monoculture lawn in 1900, let alone 1930 or something like that. Until it wasn't until the 1950s when labor laws really started to give us those weekends. More people had 2 days off, only had to work 8 hours a day, so they had evenings off, quote unquote off, right? Even then, almost every suburb created in the 40s, 50s, and 60s was pretty much a sundown town, open primarily or just to Caucasians through a variety of bylaws as well as FHA loan regulations. The FHA back in the 40s, and I think it wasn't until 48 that they finally stopped their discriminatory practice of not giving loans to African Americans, 1948. But that didn't mean stuff stopped, right? Weed laws are a vestige of neighborhood segregation tied to redlining as well, whose legacy still very much exists today. And I'm going to cover all this in my new book, and I can't wait to do it. But I would be remiss if I didn't include this in here. This isn't going to help you make an argument at a city council meeting, right? But it gives you context, deeper context into what's going on so that you can think more critically about this, because this isn't just about you can't have a natural garden, or you have to have lawn. There's so much more at play here. And there's also all these landscaping companies and manufacturers who produce fertilizer and chemicals and make lawnmowers who have huge stakes in this, right? They want these laws, okay? Because if you have to have lawn, you have to have a mower, you have to have a weed eater, you probably have to have sprinklers, you probably have to have, all that stuff, okay? So follow the money always in everything.